Okay, good morning everyone. So today's lesson is on lipids. It is the 26th of February 2021 and it is Friday. Hooray, end of the week. So the learning objectives are the same as last lesson for the carbohydrate lesson, but we'll go through them just quickly. So bronze is to define the term macromolecule and give some examples of macromolecules. Silver is to explain the properties and uses of the three main macromolecules. And gold is to compare and contrast the three macromolecules used by the body and explain why they are an essential part of the balanced diet. And your keywords for today's lesson are lipid, fatty acid, phospholipid, triglyceride, glycerol, insoluble, and hydrocarbon. So let's go through the keywords then. So lipid, that is a molecule that is insoluble in water. Fatty acid is the monomer unit of a lipid. Phospholipid is the main component of a cell membrane. A triglyceride is a molecule formed out of three fatty acids and a glycerol molecule, and it is how fat is stored within the body. Glycerol is how the body stores triglycerides within the body. Insoluble is a molecule that cannot dissolve in water, and hydrocarbon is a long chain comprising or composed of only hydrogen and carbon molecules. So you could say it by a long chain of hydrogen and carbon molecules only. You need to have the only in there. That is an essential part of this definition. So make sure you include only in there somewhere, which is why I've underlined it as well. Okay, so fats are found in the animals we eat. So I've got some little cartoons here, Chicken Run and Shaun the Sheep. Fats can be solid or liquid. So here we have a solid fat and then we have a liquid fat, which are your oils, and they are all insoluble in water. So if you put it in water, it won't combine with it and you'll see a clear layer of oil or fat in the water on its own. So types of lipids, we have triglyceride, cholesterol, and phospholipid. So triglyceride is the main one. We'll touch on phospholipid and we will touch on cholesterol. So let's start with triglycerides. So why might this molecule be called a triglyceride? Well, if we look at it, you have a glycerol in the middle and it's surrounded by three fatty acids. So three means tri. So tri is it's composed of three fatty acids, and the glyceride means that it contains a glycerol molecule. So that is why it's called triglyceride. When triglycerides are digested, they're broken down into either fats, which circulate around the body in the bloodstream, or glycerol, which is stored in the liver. They are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and a small number of oxygen atoms, and it takes a lot more energy to break these bonds, the bonds in this molecule, in comparison to carbohydrates, which is why it's a lot harder to break down fat once you've gained it, and also lose weight once you've gained it. Okay, so within fats we have something called saturated and unsaturated. So saturated fats are no double bonds within the hydrocarbon tail. So they have no double bonds present in the hydrocarbon tail. I will draw a few examples for you in a moment, comparing saturated and unsaturated, and mono and poly unsaturated. So they are typically solid at room temperature. There are large quantities in fat on meat, butter, lard, and cheese, and they raise blood cholesterol levels. So that is potentially dangerous depending on your genetic makeup. Unsaturated, on the other hand, have double bonds within the hydrocarbon tail. They are usually liquid at room temperature. Examples are olive oil, seed, and nut oil, and any oil in general. They can be monounsaturated, which means they have a single double bond in the hydrocarbon tail. Polyunsaturated, which means they have two or more double bonds in the hydrocarbon tail. Or they can be trans fats, and that means they are fats that were originally saturated and they were forced to be unsaturated by artificially adding double bonds in them. And an example of that would be margarine. Okay, so I've drawn some examples out here. So here we have a saturated fat. So as you can see, there are no double bonds in the hydrocarbon tail. Up here we have a monounsaturated fat. So there is only one double bond in the hydrocarbon tail. And over here we have a polyunsaturated fat because there are two or more double bonds in the hydrocarbon tail. So that is what I mean by saturated or unsaturated. So if you see something with a double bond in it, it will be unsaturated. If it doesn't have a double bond in it, it will be saturated. Okay, so here we have phospholipids. So phospholipids are a crucial part of cell membranes. They have this specific shape and they have a head and two tails. So the head is hydrophilic and that means water loving. And hydrophobic tails, which mean water hating. So the water loving heads will be attracted to water and water molecules, and the water hating tails would be repelled from it. So we get something called a phospholipid bilayer in our membrane. So this is what makes up the membrane, and it's like a sandwich, so a tail sandwich, if you like. So you've got hydrophilic heads on the outside, which are touching water molecules on this side here and on the inside. And you've got the water-hating hydrophobic tails on the inside, which are protected by the water-loving heads. So that is how the bilayer works. That is sort of a link to future knowledge. If you went onto A-level biology, you would learn more about this. It's actually a very interesting subject to look at and look at how they are orientated as well. So that's phospholipids. And then cholesterol is something that is produced naturally by the liver, and it's healthy in low quantities, hence why it's produced by the liver. But you can consume more cholesterol-filled foods in your diet, and in high quantities it can build up in the blood vessels and cause a blockage, like this one here. So this top one is a normal blood vessel, so the blood is flowing nice and smoothly through the vessel with no obstruction. The second one here, there is this large filling here, which is a cholesterol buildup. So that basically thins the artery or vein and stops as much blood from getting through. And then at the end here, this is when the cholesterol has expanded further and gone across the whole vessel. And these are dead red blood cells which have got stuck to the cholesterol because it has blocked the path. And this could cause issues in the future because blockages are very serious and can lead to heart attack, which is called a cardiac arrest, deep vein thrombosis, which is where a part of this clot will break off into the bloodstream, or a stroke, which is when the brain is starved for oxygen because part of the clot has broken off and has got into the brain, into the bloodstream in the brain. And food which contain high quantities of cholesterol include cheeses. Normally very mature cheddar cheese, that is what has high cholesterol levels. Feta cheese not so much, and the milder cheeses not so much, but all cheeses have some quantity of cholesterol in them. So that is what you've got to be careful with your diet. So, functions of fats then. So fats have two main functions, for energy and warmth. This polar bear here has a thick layer of fat, or blubber as we'd call it, in a seal or walrus or something like that. But this polar bear has its thick fur, but it also has a thick layer of fat underneath that fur coat so that it can be kept warm. And also, a fun fact for you, polar bears have black skin because they can absorb the sun's radiation and UV rays because black attracts sunlight and absorbs light more readily than paler skin. So that also helps with their warmth and warming them up. But it's mainly the fat underneath the skin which can be used for an energy source as well in hard times when they've got a lack of food. They can break it down and give themselves an energy source. So excess fat is stored in lipocytes, which are cells that have a fat reservoir in them. And you can see the nucleus there and the different organelles within it. There is a mitochondria there, and these are called endoplasmic reticulum, which you would learn about in A level. And they expand in size until the fat is used for fuel. So that is why you gain weight, because if you consume a lot of fat, these expand, and the adipose tissue, which is largely found in your stomach, in your thighs, and your bum as well, they have large reservoirs of fat in them, so they can expand and get bigger. So that's why you gain weight. Now, this is the final thing I want you to do. I would like you to complete this Kahoot quiz. The game pin is here, so 08731445. And you have until 7 p.m. on the 26th of February to complete this quiz. I've got it set on a challenge, so you can all challenge each other and compete for the top spot. So this is on carbohydrates and lipids, just to test your understanding and see how well you've understood the past 2 lessons. And I will see you next lesson for a lesson on proteins.